bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
And a good Thursday morning, Eagles fans. The countdown is on. We're down to just over 60 hours before they kick it off between the Giants and the Eagles on Saturday afternoon, which kind of makes John McMullen's life more difficult. He's all confused. He's got to go listen to Nick Sirianni today. He thinks it's a Friday. Said, don't let me make a pick on the game, Jody. We got the show to do tomorrow. I said, not a problem, John. We'll get it done. Busy yesterday for you heading down to the NovaCare complex. In your estimation, was it a good Wednesday?
Trying to think of the day. Yeah, it was a good, I think it's a competent team. I think there's signs that, everything's back to normal, so to speak, not from necessarily, Jalen and Lane are banged up, but everybody knows they're going to play. And, the whole offense is going to be on the table. There's going to be no hemming and hawing, no trying to protect Jalen Hurts. And so from that part, it's all positive. Now, if they dominate the game and they're up significantly in the second half, you might see some scale back. But they know they got to win the game and shrink wrap is off, so to speak, back to normal.
That's what I think every Eagle fan wants to hear. And yes, our producer Tone told me before the show, I'm starting to look like Jalen Hurts. I used to be able to throw. I can't throw like I used to, and I sure as hell never could throw like Jalen Hurts. But with the eye black under the eyes, I'm getting close to my Jalen Hurts look. And we're going to be looking at him in that first series and specifically the play calling and how they handle it, because we all agree it was a somewhat scaled back Eagles offensive game plan against the Giants just 2 weeks ago. One that was good enough to give them the win, a win that they needed, but it just didn't wow anybody, impress anybody, and it does give you pause that there is the possibility that they still think they can't go to everything in their bag of tricks. Well, Shane Steichen, who you got a chance to hear from yesterday, basically put that to rest, right? He said that everything is on the table for this game coming up this week. Correct?
I don't know if he did it on the record, to tell you the truth. Shane is very guarded. I'd have to read through the transcript, but all indications from talking to the players and coaches behind the scenes, they expect everything to be back to normal from a play calling perspective and everything to be on the table. And I thought that's the way it would go. That seems to be the way it's going to go with it. Now, for those assuming that means Jalen Hurts is 100%, that's the part I don't agree with. People are banged up in this league all the time and they play through it. And that's what's going on with Jalen and Lane Johnson for that matter. So, but the stakes, rise, obviously, win or go home. Got to win the football game. You can't mess around. Even though you're a pretty significant favorite, you got a better team, better personnel. Can't mess around in these environments, Jody.
Understood. So you got both coordinators yesterday, Steichen and Gannon. You said didn't necessarily come out and say everything was on the table, but he certainly hinted at it. Might have given you more off the record details. One thing that he did say is they will need to adapt because, in Steichen's opinion, the Giant defense has improved. Certainly last week we saw the Giant defense adjust with blitzing out of Wink Martindale and handled it successfully against the Minnesota Vikings, made it work. So you don't know how blitz heavy the Giants are going to be coming into this game. That's the challenge of every football game. The stakes are raised because it's a playoff game, but it's a chess match between the OC on one side, the DC on the other, and vice versa when the teams exchange the ball. You like this matchup, Shane Steichen against Wink Martindale for this game from an Eagle perspective?
Yeah, because Shane's got the better weapons. Shane's got the better personnel, and he's proven, one of the things I've really liked about Shane Steichen as a play caller, and his record's outrageous since he took over this team, especially when Jalen Hurts is starting, was the Chargers game last year when he took over. So a pretty significant winning percentage. He's a guy that doesn't get caught up in the bells and whistles necessarily. And if you're not stopping something, he's going to pick at it. He's going to pick at it and pick at it and pick at it and pick at it and make you stop it. And I think that's the way you should play offensive football. I think a lot of younger coaches, and Shane's very young, get caught up in those bells and whistles, and they want to show off, and they want to do all this stuff that make people go wow. And I go back to Jimmy Johnson. 3 running plays, Jody. 3 running plays. Can't stop it. Just keep doing it. I always talk about Hal Mummy and when the XFL put mics on coaches, which they hate, you got an insight into it. And he just said, do it again. And that's the way it should be. And Shane's really good at that. And I think, there's this big convoluted, you got to do this and you got to have trick plays. And who does trick plays? People who think they need to trick the defense. Who doesn't? People who know they're going to whip the defenses. What?
There is a confidence aspect to it, and Shane Steichen should have confidence in his offense if Jalen is X percent. Then again, we don't know what that percent is. We don't know what he's going to be at. Will it match up? The key is, will they be able to call what they called for the first 14 weeks of the season, which placed Jalen Hurts either at or near the top of the MVP race in the National Football League. If they can do that, they should put up more than enough points against this Giants team. And Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon both spoke about the improved New York Giants, which I will certainly give you that they're improved. It all depends on where you want to excerpt your demarcation line. Giants was 6-1, right? Didn't you and I do a bunch of shows here on Birds 365 where you said,
yeah.
And I can't believe the Giants are 6-1. I'm not sure this is a real 6-1. I don't really know. I know the record says they're 6-1, but they don't look like 6-1 to me. And then they lost to the Lions. They lost to the Cowboys. They tied the Commanders. The Eagles went up there and put a beat down on them. So they lose 3 out of 4. They won none out of 4 because the one non-loss was a tie. Well, since then, they've improved. But who are we comparing the most recent Giant games to? The team that started 6-1 or the team that went 0-3-1 in the middle of the season? If you compare them just to the 0-3-1, oh, yeah, sure. The Giants were improved. No questions asked. But we're basing this improvement basically on 2 games. They beat up the Colts in week 17 with Nick Foles laying on the ground and Ryan Thibodeau doing snow angels next to him. Okay. Nicky Six wasn't quite ready to play. It wasn't like him coming off the bench for the Eagles in 2017. Didn't have a lot going for him. And then last week against Minnesota. So 2 games is what we're basing the much improved Giants on. Are they really that improved, John?
I think they are improved from, the pre-Brian Daboll era. pretty significantly improved. So again, it depends on the scale. I do think they're the least talented personnel team that was in the playoffs. And again, I give a ton of credit to this coaching staff. But I mean, we started with the defense, so I'll focus on the defense. And, you know, Wink's a great coach. I mean, that is a great staff. Mike Kapka is a great offensive coordinator. Brian Daboll, as I mentioned, Wink Martindale. And I love the fact that Wink is able to be malleable. I think that's a big thing. And, but that defense didn't play well against Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota went up and down the field. Now, situationally, they were pretty good on certain third downs. But as far as giving up yardage, they just did it a different way. You know, typically they give up the explosive plays because they're blitzing. Now they played the umbrella coverage, and, you know, Minnesota went right down the field. You know, people talk about the Eagles and Jonathan Gannon, and everybody's focused on the last play, which was more Kevin O'Connell's fault than Kirk Cousins. But Cousins was 31 of 39 in that game, Jody. 31 of 39. He was doing whatever he wanted. The problem was the Minnesota defense. So the offense, that was out of character. And you say that's the best the Giants offense has played in since the last time they played Minnesota. Which so you wonder how much of it is, are they getting better, or it was just, you know, a really bad defense? Probably a little bit of both. They've certainly gotten better. I think Daniel Jones has done a tremendous job of taking care of the football. I've said this pretty consistently because we talk so much Giants, because it seems like they're playing them every other week, the Eagles. He was a turnover machine early in his career with different coaches. And now he's taking care of the football, and that is a big aspect of it. And obviously Saquon Barkley's healthy. You know, had a career high in rushing yards, big impact in the passing game. And that Hodgins kid, they found him. And I think, you know, people dismiss it because they found him in an unconventional fashion. Sometimes NFL teams miss. Look, he might turn out to be Travis Fulgham. And, you know, after this little mini run he has, he'll go into, you know, oblivion. You know, maybe that happens, but he's playing pretty well. He really is. But he doesn't have that pedigree. I talk it all the time with TJ Edwards. Why isn't TJ Edwards a Pro Bowl player? Pedigree. Why don't people believe in Isaiah Hodgins? Pedigree. They're playing them. They're playing. It's in front of you. So I think they are improved. Are they improved to where they should be in the conversation with one of the best teams in football? I don't think so.
Neither do I. And I do want to just double check one thing. Do you believe that Kevin O'Connell was more guilty of that 4-yard catch on 4th and 8?
Oh, yeah.
Than the guy who threw the football?
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you why, Jody. Next Gen Stats has that little tool where you can do the 11 on 11 with the dots. That on that play call, and I tweeted it, and everybody can go look at it. He called, remember the situation, 4th and 8. He called a double corner routes from Thielen and Jefferson 25 yards down the field. 25 yards down the field, your best two receivers. Remember, Dexter Lawrence is having a game where he's had 10 hurries. He's destroying the interior of the offensive line. And he's got his best receivers running 25 yards down the field. The only option for Cousins was an in route to KJ Osborne, who's the third best receiver. And he had a little bit of a window to try to stick it in, but the guy was just all over him, the Giants defensive back. And then the other option was Hawkinson, who's running a 3-yard route. So, look, I'm the first to say Kirk Cousins should have thrown it up, should have done a Hail Mary. I'm not saying it's not partially his fault, but that was an awful play call for that situation. And I've said this on other shows. Mike McDaniel as well with Miami. You know, I talk about this all the time, Jody. Those two guys got bogged down in big situations because they're worried about the play call. And they just made terrible terrible decisions. And that's why I go CEO coach. And you see Brian Daboll, CEO coach, Nick Sirianni, CEO coach. The only one in the NFC who isn't a CEO coach is Kyle Shanahan, and we all know his reputation. Those guys, those young coaches that everybody loves, they just got bogged down in the biggest situations of their season.
They may have, and I understand and agree with your CEO coach position. I'm sorry, it's on the quarterback. No matter how bad the play design was,
throw it up. I agree with that.
That outweighs the stupidity of the play call. And there was some stupidity attached. I'm not giving O'Connell a free pass for sure. Not that they had a lousy play design. When you put that ball right there, you have to throw it past the sticks. Have to. There's no other excuse. There's nothing that outweighs it. Kirk Cousins made the decision to throw it short of the sticks. That outweighs anything else that Kevin O'Connell might have done. I'll tell you right now, if the Eagles are faced with the same exact position on Saturday against Giants, hopefully not Eagle fans, he's not throwing to Dallas Goedert at 4 yards short. He's going to force the ball to A.J. Brown in coverage. He's going to hope that Devontae Smith can go up and make a play. He's not going to make that same mistake because he's just a smarter, more savvy quarterback than Kirk Cousins is. No, the number one person to play is Kirk Cousins.
The day after the game, before I saw the next gen stats, play, I saw the all 22. I said it's unforgivable, and I still say that the situation. You're right. I don't care if it's the worst play call in the world, and it might have been the worst play call in the world.
Could be.
He should have thrown it up. He did the same thing in Buffalo. He won a game.
Right.
Jefferson just went up and made the unbelievable catch. It's unforgivable. I'm not making excuses for the quarterback. I'm just pointing out, when you hear coaches say they didn't put him in a position to succeed of any player, sometimes that's true. Kevin O'Connell hamstrung his team in the biggest situation. Mike McDaniel did the same thing with Miami. They had a chance for, Minnesota was supposed to win that game. Miami had a chance to have one of the biggest upsets ever with Skylar Thompson playing quarterback against the mighty Buffalo Bills. And this guy consistently couldn't get the play call in. Consistently, to the point they had to burn all their timeouts. And then at the end, they couldn't burn a timeout because they didn't have one, and they got to delay a game. Just one of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen. Nathaniel Hackett worthy, but he won some games. Obviously, he's not going to get fired. And Kevin O'Connell, to a lesser degree, one of the worst play calls you're ever going to see in a big situation with a season on the line.
Well, all of that may be true. It does not outweigh that you can't throw the ball 4 yards when you need 8 on 4th down. And you have no timeouts left. I'm sorry. That just outweighs whatever god-awful coaching decision that he made.
You and I agree on that, but
we don't agree because you said you believe O'Connell was more at fault than Cousins.
I didn't say he was more at fault.
What you absolutely did. That's why I asked you. I said, did I hear this right? Let me confirm this, and you said it again.
Because Jody, you stop. Bang. In your mind, he made an egregious mistake, and you stop. I'm saying there's other parts to it, and there's other parts to it. I said it was unforgivable from the quarterback. But that doesn't mean there's not other parts to it.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you don't know, if you're the head coach and you don't know your quarterback, and by the way, that's the biggest criticism I can give to Kirk Cousins. The fact he's been playing that long and doesn't understand the situation, that's the bigger criticism. But if you're the coach and you've been the guy for 18 games and you don't know that and you put him in that situation, there's more to it. That's where you and I disagree. There's far more to it because there are certain quarterbacks that are savvy enough to do things on their own. By game 18 with a quarterback, if he's in a situation you don't know that as a coach, you better put your quarterback in a better stinking situation. That's where we differ.
No, I agree with you that it was a god-awful play call. Shame on O'Connell and the entire compilation of individuals who contributed to it at that time on that play. Shame on all of them. I'm not giving O'Connell a free pass. But the question I asked twice, now let's go to third time. If you had to put them in an order, who was most to blame for the failure of that play? The play caller, the head coach, Kevin O'Connell, or the quarterback who threw the ball 4 yards when he needed 8? Who was more to blame?
The left guard. How's that? The left guard who let Dexter Lawrence run him over like he was a road apple and destroyed any option. You know, maybe if
So
the
you
left
don't want
guard,
what you're saying, John, is you don't want to answer the question. It was a pretty simple question.
no,
It was the choice A or choice B.
what
And
you're
you wanna go
saying
to
is,
choice C?
no,
What-
Jody, here's the difference. You're saying you want me to give you your answer to the question.
No, if you want,
That's the
I'm just.
difference.
No,
I'm
John,
giving
you
you.
just said you didn't say that, so I'm giving you one more chance to
I'm
clarify.
giving you-
Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not hearing well. Maybe this whole
That's
thing
true.
to my head
You
is,
are
is
not
making me.
hearing well. We can replay the show. Anybody can go to YouTube. You asked me who's most at fault for that particular
Correct.
play.
And
First
your
of all,
answer is
There's 67 things that went wrong on the play. If you ask me, and you only asked me at the very end, who was most responsible, I just gave you the answer. The left guard, who was a road apple. What I'm trying to say is, and if you could open the ears, if he blocks Dexter Lawrence, maybe Jefferson's open 25 yards down the field. Maybe Adam Thielen's open 25 yards down the field. Maybe they make a big play. When you blow up, when you can't block a play. So if you're asking me who was at fault, Kevin O'Connell was at fault. Kirk Cousins was at fault. But who was it most at fault? The left guard who got run over and destroyed the play from second one.
then
That's who's most at fault.
okay. Then you and I would disagree. I would not put the left guard or Kevin O'Connell or anyone else ahead of Kirk Cousins in assigning top blame for that play. For me, my opinion, my football opinion is it's more on Cousins than anyone else. If you think differently, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I understood where you're coming from. If you say it was mostly on the left guard, all right, that's your call. My call was Kirk Cousins. He's got it. He has to throw the ball 8 yards, period. End of conversation. Before they ever snap the play, before it's ever designed, before it's ever running through his head, he's got to know he's got to throw it.
And we got to get to John Stolas, the greatest quarterback in the history of the world, who you ever want to talk about, Tom Brady, Joe Montana. If a game wrecker like Micah Parsons or Dexter Lawrence completely blows up a play, there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do. They can throw it up.
That would have been preferable to the pass he threw.
Yes,
throwing it up would have been preferable.
It would have been preferable. We agree. But it doesn't mitigate the fact that the offensive lineman allowed a player to blow up the play from minute one. So you asked me who's most at fault?
Right.
The left guard.
Yeah, and I say the quarterback. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are Mac and Mac. John Stolas from Bleeding Green Nation joins us next here on Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Since 1977, it's always been about you, the community, at Rafferty Subaru. And through the Subaru Love Promise, we prove we care by supporting charities like So Good Now.
So Good Now helps kids in under-resourced areas by connecting them with student athletes to serve as mentors. We remove barriers so athletes can help youth in the corners of our communities where light and love are needed most.
When you choose Rafferty Subaru, you help organizations like So Good Now.
It's all about you at Rafferty Subaru.
Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Game Show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post Game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
Welcome back, guys, here on Birds 365. Joining us now from Bleeding Green Nation and his Eagles podcast, Eye on the Enemy, is Mr. John Stolnis. Do we really need an eye on the enemy? Don't we know the enemy well enough this week, John? We're kind of familiar with Big Blue coming to town, are we not?
Yeah, this will be the third time in like 6 weeks I've talked to the same SB Nation analyst about the Giants. So I don't know if there's a whole lot more ground to cover here, but it's nice to just chat anyway. So.
Well, there's paralysis by over-analysis, John. Do you think that could be a potential problem for both teams? Because, yeah, I mean, they've seen, both Week 18 is different a little bit because it really wasn't the Eagles versus the Giants. So maybe that mitigates some of that, but is it a possibility?
I think it mitigates it. I think both teams went into Week 18 with very different mindsets as opposed to the first game and as opposed to the game they're going to play on Saturday night. And, the Giants are healthier coming into this game. They have more players available to them than they did last time, especially on defense. So I don't think that'll factor into it this time around. I do think that if they had played all starters and that Week 18 game met everything for both teams, you could get a little bit of a paralysis by analysis. But, these guys, the Eagles also had an extra week to prepare. So I would imagine these guys know how to make it work. But yeah, as fans, sure, we know this team really well. I mean, we could dive into Dexter Lawrence and Saquon and Daniel Jones and all that at the end of the day. It's going to be, when you're facing a team a third time like this, what can each coach do, I think, to surprise the other team? What kind of tricks are left up their sleeves? And I think because the second game didn't matter a whole lot, the Eagles were vanilla. I think the Giants knew that there's a possibility they could play the Eagles in the playoffs, so they didn't want to give away too much. I think this will act more as like the second game of the season rather than the third.
All right, John, I do want to talk about one of those specific games, and that's the last game of the year, which Jalen Hurts was returning from missing 2 weeks. They hoped that Gardner Minshew could get him a win in one of those two games and Jalen could take the rest of the regular season off. Didn't happen, so Jalen had to play in week number 18. 20 of 35, 229, no touchdowns, did throw a pick. How would you say Jalen threw the ball? Just the way he threw it, knowing that he's in quasi-protect mode. The Giant defense was what it was, missing a lot of their key players. How do you think he threw the ball in the game against the Giants last game of the regular season?
I mean, just based on the eye test, I thought he threw the ball fine. Especially between the 20s, the offense moved really well. He got it to his receivers. He seemed like he was able to make all the throws. I didn't see anything that would make me believe that he was limited. But the Eagles also ran a vanilla offense. They didn't ask him to do too much. So I think there's still that doubt as to how healthy the shoulder is. And I think the Eagles have been slow playing the injury a little bit. They've been really forthcoming with details about Hurts' shoulder over these last couple of weeks, and they don't usually do that. And so my belief, it's my little conspiracy theory, is that the shoulder's better than they've been letting on, and that they're going to unleash him on Saturday night. That's maybe a hopeful analysis, but I think that he's better. I think he's better than he showed the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the bye week is very important. I'm not quite to your level of the conspiracy theory because I think, but I hear what you're saying. The Eagles are typically very, very guarded. He's not 100%, but I think the extra week helps him calm down sort of the soreness. My concern is if you beat the Giants, and I've talked to Jody about this, then you don't have that extra week. You have it for the Super Bowl, but you don't have it for the championship game. And then you got to go back out there and play. But you got to get over the Giants first. Now, John, you mentioned it's like the second game. Now, is there some angst with that? Because the Eagles beat Washington, and then they lost to Washington. They beat Dallas, then they lost to Dallas. Now, granted, Gardner Minshew at the controls. So this is the real second game. Any angst over that?
I think more from the defensive side of things than the offensive side of things. I think on the offensive side of the ball, you know what the Giants are going to do. They're going to send blitzes. It hurts. They can't handle all of the Eagles' weapons without blitzing. And Wink Martindale blitzes, as often as he breathes. So, I mean, he's going to send guys. He's going to send extra guys at Hurts all day and see if Hurts' shoulder and see how mobile he is with his shoulder and see if Hurts can make plays like he did in the first game where, remember that one blitz where he just took off right up the middle and scored the easiest touchdown you're ever going to see. Whether or not he's going to be able to do that here in the second game. So I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of exotic looks or things that the Giants do differently on defense. There'll be some. Defensively, I wonder about a healthier Saquon Barkley, whether or not the Eagles defense will be up to the challenge of taking care of him. And the Giants look like they're doing more offensively now than they did the first time around. They're letting Daniel Jones throw on first down. It's not run to set up hopefully a 3rd and 5 where you pass the ball. So the Eagles have to be ready for that. Jonathan Gannon has to be prepared for that. TJ Hawkinson. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was sorry, that's Vikings, but they're using Hodges more than they were in the first game. They're finding different ways to get the ball down the field a little bit more. And so I do have a concern defensively with this team and whether or not they're going to be ready for the new stuff that the Giants are doing, the way they played against Minnesota last week, and their ability to kind of stop that up.
JS, a lot of people that believe the Giants have a chance to beat the Eagles this week are hanging their hopes on an improved secondary from 6 weeks ago. Both Dory Jackson and Xavier McKinney missed the game against the Eagles, and they're two key members of the Eagles secondary. They played well last week in limiting Justin Jefferson, but also gave up a lot of yards to the aforementioned TJ Hawkinson underneath, specifically that all-important 4-yard catch on 4th and 8. Which guy adds more to their defensive secondary? Is there a guy that you can really look at out of those two and go, yeah, without them, their secondary is just not the same?
It's the cornerback, because I think you have to find a way to handle A.J. Brown. But they have an interesting problem on their hands, because even with those two guys back, you have Brown, but you also have Devontae Smith, who really stepped up his game in the second half of the season and played well for the Eagles. And with Dallas, I don't feel like since Dallas Goedert came back that the Eagles have utilized him enough. I think this is a game where they really need to and really could focus in on getting Dallas Goedert more targets and giving him an opportunity to do a little bit more, because with the amount of that they blitz, I think there's opportunities there in the screen game for Dallas Goedert. I think there's opportunities in the middle of the field for Dallas Goedert. And if they're going to really focus on trying to bracket A.J. Brown the way they did Justin Jefferson and try, the Vikings didn't have a really good number 2 option at receiver. So the Eagles do. And I don't know that they're going to be able to do the same thing to Brown that they did to Jefferson, because if they do, well, then you feed Devontae Smith, you feed Dallas Goedert. And, Quez, I think we're all a little down on Quez Watkins, but Quez Watkins serves some purposes in this offense, and you take a couple of deep shots with him. So I think the Eagles have more that the Giants need to worry about. So even though they're healthier than last time, they still don't have enough answers unless the blitz gets home, unless the Eagles have trouble protecting Jalen Hurts. If they can figure that part of it out, there are going to be lots of opportunities for Hurts to get the ball to his guys.
Yeah, defensively, I think, the Giants, I think their curveball was last week because they played umbrella coverage. They typically blitz, I think, 55% of the time, by far the most in the NFL. I don't think they're going to come in and play umbrella coverage against the Eagles. I think they're going to go back to what they are defensively, which is more of what we think of with Wink Martindale. Now, you do have Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney back, so they're better from a personnel perspective than they were when they lost 48-22. And we had Pat Leonard on the show from the New York Daily News, and he even said the Giants were shook in the locker room. They were like, "Ooh, we just got our butts kicked." Is this just as simple as the Eagles are just better? There's not much you can do. As good as this coaching staff is, and I think it's one of the best in the NFL, and I'm talking about the Giants. Brian Daboll, Mike Kapka, we all know is already getting serious head coaching looks. Wink Martindale, his reputation, that's as good as it gets in this league. They just don't have the weapons. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I think it's fair to say that the Giants looked really good against maybe the worst defense in the NFL last week. I think not a lot of people are talking about how truly bad the Vikings defense was all season. I think you're also underestimating. I think people are forgetting how good the Eagles coaching staff is. I mean, yes, the Giants coaching staff is getting a lot of attention because they're coming off a wild card win. They surprised a lot of teams, a lot of analysts this year. Certainly they surprised me by playing as well as they did. The Eagles have surpassed expectations this year by a lot. Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen's up for a number of head coaching jobs. Jonathan Gannon, for whatever anybody thinks about him, he's up for a number of head coaching jobs. And some of the other guys down the line are going to move up if those guys move along. So I don't think we want to underestimate the Eagles coaching staff either. I mean, the Giants coaching staff is getting all the headlines. And that's usually what happens after Wild Card Weekend, right? All the teams that win on Wild Card Weekend, they played. They get a lot of press and they look real. Most of the time they look good because you win a playoff game. You look good. Everybody's talking about how great Daniel Jones looked. And he did look good. And the Eagles are going to have to account for him. He's not the same guy as we've seen in previous seasons. That said, the gap between Daniel Jones and Jalen Hurts, I think, is still pretty darn big. And the Eagles have talent advantages at virtually there's not a matchup that the Giants present in this game that is, I think, superior to the matchup the Eagles present.
All right, John. See, this is a question for both you guys. So it's John or John. Again, maybe my memory is failing me, but Lane Johnson has been a Hall of Fame level right tackle basically since he came into the league. And he's had his fair share of injuries that have taken him out for the rest of the year. But we've also seen previously where he's gone down and come back. I'm trying to remember an incident where he came back and he wasn't 100%. And another team actually took advantage of him being uber committed to get back out on the field as quickly as possible. Am I forgetting something? Am I missing something? Because I have this close to 100% confidence that Lane Johnson's going to be Lane Johnson this week, even though he's playing with an injury that actually needs surgery. Am I forgetting a time where Lane tried to come back too early and wasn't his Lane-like self?
I would say when he had the tightrope surgery in his ankle, and he was trying to get through the season, and he had to shut it down and have reconstructive surgery. He wasn't himself, but he still wasn't exposed. He still wasn't exposed. In other words, he was playing through such significant pain, and he didn't have his power, and he's playing on one leg. He's still not giving up sacks and hurries. He's really an amazing player. And that's why, John brings up the point of the Giants playing last week, and everybody's saying, Dexter Lawrence was unbelievable, but Kayvon Thibodeau, 2 years from now, I said this on the show, John, earlier in the week, we might be saying, man, Kayvon Thibodeau, but right now against Lane Johnson, that's a mismatch. Even 85% Lane Johnson. I said, that is a mismatch I'm with you, Jody. I have no even thought that Lane Johnson won't hold up on the offensive line, even though I'm acknowledging no way he's 100%.
I think I saw something too on Twitter yesterday where some of the reporters were talking about Lane in practice, and there was, I think, one thing I saw where he like lifted a guy up off the ground during pass protection. I saw that. And I was like, I feel a lot better now knowing that he's able to do that with the injury that he has.
Yeah, he was testing himself, and he said last week, yesterday's practice would be a big test for him because he wants to play without any help as far as painkillers, and we'll see if he can do that. But Lane is like, I don't have many concerns in this game, but he's way down on the list as he typically is, even when he's 100% healthy.
All right. Speaking of test, is this a test for Miles Sanders? Yesterday, he said his preference is certainly to stay here in Philadelphia, wants to sign an extension with the Eagles. He's had a damn good season up until the last couple of weeks when he tweaked the knee and he hasn't been as quick. The burst hasn't been as good, but we're only a couple of weeks removed from him going nuts against the Giants at the Meadowlands. Is this a Miles Sanders game? Are they going to lean on him early and try and figure out what he's got in the tank? And if not, be ready to go to Gainwell and Scott? Or is this going to be a share the wealth game from the first snap, do you think, Johnny S.?
Well, it's a Giants game, so it's most likely going to be a Boston Scott game in some way.
At least inside the 10, we know that's the case.
Yeah. But I think Miles Sanders with that week of rest, and he hasn't gotten a whole lot of action here in the last few weeks of the season either. After a few 100-yard games or he set career highs, he kind of quieted down after that. And that's, I don't know as much him as it is play calling and the way the situation's kind of worked out. But I do think this is a huge opportunity for him. It does sound like he wants to come back. I think the obstacle for him coming back next year is all of the different players on defense that the Eagles would perhaps like to bring back, and you've got to probably pay the quarterback this offseason as well. There are other options among running backs in free agency. It's a loaded free agent class, so that could potentially be an avenue to him coming back. There are some guys I think higher up in the hierarchy than Miles Sanders. So he fits this offense. He fits what they want to do. I think we've seen a tougher running style from him this year. I think he's talked about that, getting a little bit more aggressive, running through tackles a little bit more than he has, and I think he was a little bit better in the passing game this year. He wasn't a negative every single time he touched the ball. So he's had some issues with fumbles lately. That's not usually a problem for him. Hopefully that's going to get cleaned up and we won't see that again here in the postseason. If he puts together a couple of big games in the playoffs, it's going to be difficult for the Eagles to not bring him back. But again, there are other options out there this offseason. So I think it's a big question whether or not Miles Sanders comes back next year.
I want to give you guys a mojo question. I know what Nick Sirianni would say to this, but I want to hear what you guys say to this. The Giants have been playing this up all week. So in 6 games against number 1 seeds since restructuring in 1990, the Giants are a perfect 6-0. That 6-game win streak versus number 1 seeds is the longest by any franchise since the NFL began seeding playoff teams in 1975. Does that matter at all?
No. No. I mean, those are different players on different teams. I mean,
yes, that's what Nick would say. What does that have to do with me?
It doesn't have anything to do with anything. And a few years ago, the Eagles went into the Meadowlands as a 6 seed and beat the Giants as a 1 seed. Those, what was that? 2008. So, I mean, long time ago. And I don't think, those kinds of things are interesting. They're kind of fun. They kind of show you that you can't take a number 6 seed for granted. I don't think there's a worry of that. I don't think the Eagles are coming in overconfident. I think the struggles they had in the last month of the season should have wiped away any sense of overinflated superiority that they may have. I think they're going to approach this game. I think it's going to be closer than the 7.5 line indicates. I think it's going to be a tough game. And I think the Eagles and fans appropriately are looking at this game, not as a walkover, but as it's going to be a tough divisional battle at home. And it doesn't have, what happened years ago doesn't have any impact on it, but it is going to be a tough game. The Giants are a pretty good 6 seed coming in here.
And some people are quoting the stat of the Eagles having won 9 games in a row at Lincoln Financial Field. So they beat the Ben McAdoo Giants, or they beat the Pat Shurmur Giants. It doesn't really move the needle for me, but the only one that matters is they beat them 2 weeks ago, but they didn't beat them as handily as they did, as people thought they were going to before the game started. The Giants did get 2 late touchdowns, though, and the Eagles' first-team defense was still on the field. All right, one kind of nice catch by a wide receiver who's woefully underachieved this year in Kenny Galladay. Slay had solid coverage on the play. Not great. The great one tips the ball away. He didn't. But is that of a concern that even with their second and third teamers, they made it a game late, and they did so more against Eagle defense. Eagle defense was great for 3 quarters. They had a field goal. They completely took the Giants out of their offensive game, but had breakdowns late. Why do you think that is? And is that where you're going into this game, John?
Yeah, I think they just let up. I think they let up seeing that they were against the second and third teamers. I don't think that they, once they got that 2-score lead late, I just feel like the defense just didn't keep their foot on the gas. It shouldn't happen. I'm sure that's something they've talked about. But I don't think they expected a deep shot to Kenny Galladay to result in, the first touchdown Galladay's had in 2 seasons with the Giants. I just feel like there's not an excuse for it. And Jonathan Gannon, I'm sure, has talked to them about it. But they just let their foot off the gas. I think they felt like at that point they had secured the game, that they just needed to kind of manage the rest of the game from that point on. And they played that way. And you just can't play that way, even against second and third stringers in the NFL most of the time.
All right. Tremendous disrespect from Nick Sirianni this week by ordering stuffed crust pizza as he's prepping for the New York Giants. On the other hand, New York Knicks guard Jalen Brunson, tremendous disrespect by wearing a Jalen Hurts jersey instead of supporting the New York Giants. Who wins the nonsense battle, John? Which fan base?
I think anytime you're thinking pizza has anything to do with anything that's happening on a field, you win the knucklehead war there. And not only that, I saw some takes online talking about Domino's Pizza being number 1 out of all the chains. That's ludicrous on its face. So I'm glad they went with Pizza Hut as if you're, first of all, you can't go chain. What are you doing going chain if you're in the Philadelphia
Yeah, now
region?
I've heard that, John, but I think the snobs are just as bad. So, you hear it with the IPA, you got the beer snobs. Now we have the local, you hear it all the time with the cheesesteak snobs, the pizza snob. If you want stuffed crust pizza, go get stuffed crust pizza. Let people live. That's my theory.
That's fine. I prefer, if I have an opportunity to have, a pizza made by a real pizzeria, stuffed crust or no, that's a no-brainer for me. I can't even think twice about it.
All right. I need both you guys' opinions on this one from the disrespect file. Did you see what Joe Mixon said yesterday? The Bengals running back?
No.
That the NFL is seriously disrespecting the Bengals by putting tickets on sale for the Bills and the Chiefs in Atlanta for the AFC Championship game because it needs to be played at a neutral site. So they feel they need to get out in front. Well, yeah, Joe's got a point. The Bills aren't there yet. The Bills have to beat the Bengals first. First things first. He said, how dare they do that? They're not giving. Are you telling me we got no chance to win this game in Buffalo this week? Does Mixon have right footing to say we're being disrespected by, Roger Goodell and his entire NFL front office?
Even if Roger Goodell is disrespected, why does that matter? Why does that matter? If it was like, if you've got your opponent who is saying this team has no chance against us, I guarantee you win, put that on the bulletin board. Absolutely. First of all, and no, I don't agree with Joe Mixon. It's business, right?
Yeah,
it's business.
And more than that, it's logistics. You gotta, you gotta sell 70,000 tickets in a short time frame, and you got to get it done.
Well, and any fan that wants to travel, they got to book flights. They got to figure out if they're dry. But obviously players do what they do to get themselves fired up for different reasons. That's all this is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, by the way, it should be. If that nonsense gets you fired up and it works for you, use it. But I think, logical people see it in a different direction. One of the more interesting matchups for a lot of, and I'll leave it here, at John Stolness. Make sure read John at bleedinggreennation.com. Also, Hot Stove Action, The Good Fight, PH. Kaiser White and Saquon Barkley are both from Lehigh County. They've been playing each other since high school. Mighty Emmaus versus Whitehall. Kaiser got the best of Saquon back in the day because his teams were much better. To me, he's a big part of it because the offense of the Giants, we talk about Saquon as a runner. He's a great receiver, and they try to get him out in space with those dumps in the flats. And if you don't tackle, and if you let him get out in space, you could have some issues. And to me, Kaiser White hasn't been playing his best down the stretch of the season, although he did play well against the Giants JV. Is that sort of one of those underrated matchups we got to pay more attention to? Because you also have to spy Daniel Jones as well, and that might be the speedy Kaiser White's sort of duty.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a weak point on the Eagles' defense, it's Kaiser and his ability to work effectively in the passing game, and certainly Saquon looks rejuvenated. He did not look right the first time these teams played. They ran him into the ground, and I think he hit a lull at midseason where he just wasn't very effective. He looked pretty again against a terrible Vikings defense. He looked rejuvenated last week. We'll see if he has that same kind of juice this week. I think running the football and coming out of the backfield, Saquon, that's got to be their number one target. That's the guy that they've got to focus in on. And hopefully Gannon has some ways to scheme things up to make sure that it's not all up to Kaiser White, because that is a worrisome matchup in the passing game, whether or not he can hang with Saquon. I don't know that any linebacker has a real ability to hang with Saquon over there. So, you might have to utilize your safety. You might have to, kind of get some different guys into the mix here in order to keep an eye on him. But that would be a matchup that the Giants could look to exploit in this game, because Kaiser has struggled. I mean, he did play, like you said, better the last couple of weeks. He's effective in the run game, but coming out of the backfield, he has a hard time with running backs and tight ends.
2 quick questions for you before we let you run, Johnny. Number one, if I tell you the game on Saturday will be won by the more physical team, who wins?
I want to say that's Philadelphia. That offensive line and the defense, I think you win in the trenches if it's a more physical game, right? And I think the Eagles have the best offensive line in football, and their defense almost broke the NFL sack record this year. So I look at those two lines. I look at those matchups on the interior. I look at those in the trenches, and the Eagles should be able to out-physical those teams, especially if Lane Johnson's 100%. You got Mailata and Johnson on either side. Landon Dickerson is a beast in the middle. I know Kelsey's kind of he's a lighter center. He's a guy that he's more on the more athletic side. And I know the Giants with Dexter Lawrence are talking up that could be a mismatch for them, but you've got a lot of things working on that interior. I think that's a more physical interior. And then you look at the Eagles defensive line, how they just keep Josh Sweat coming back is big. They're going to have all the rotation guys. Robert Quinn looked better in his last game of the season. So I think if the more physical team is going to win, I do think that favors Philadelphia because of the advantages they should have on both lines.
All right. And I don't want to disrespect anybody. So I'm not going to say who's coming to Philadelphia next week. I'll say either who's coming to Philadelphia or where are the Giants going next week, San Francisco or Dallas, who wins the Sunday night affair in the NFC?
That's a good question. Dak played really, really well last week. But again, Tampa was an under 500 team. So you have to take that with a grain of salt in some capacity. But the Cowboys did look real good. They've got a lot of weapons. And as well as Brock Purdy has played, there's just, maybe the Cinderella slipper is going to fall off if Brock Purdy has to hit the road. It might not happen at home. I think you have to take the 49ers to win that game. They've been more consistent, especially in the second half of the season over the Cowboys. Dak, against that defense, he's been interception prone all season. He throws a pick or two against San Francisco. I don't know that the Cowboys are able to overcome that. I would say San Francisco probably wins that game.
Johnny, yes, always a pleasure. Know you're going to enjoy the game on Saturday night. Hopefully,
Yes,
we
sir.
get a chance to. We're going to get you on again at some point. Doesn't matter whether Eagle season's over and done, whether it goes till mid-February. You know we're going to be coming calling, but we hope to get you on again to preview another Eagle game before the month is out.
Sounds good, guys.
Thanks, John.
From Bleeding Green Nation. His podcast is Eye on the Enemy, and the enemy this week is the New York Giants. All right, Johnny, so you're heading down to get a little insight from Coach Sirianni. He'll give you guys a little extra off the record. Anything you're going to be able to get on the record today? Do you think he's going to tell you that, all right, here, you guys can go with this, and he'll give you some insight?
Now, you never know with Nick, but it's usually something stupid like stuffed crust pizza that people run with. Or, you know, obviously the flour analogy would be the greatest example of that. So typically, yeah, if it's something on the record, it's going to be something like that. It's not going to be, hey, the Giants don't do this well, and we're going to beat the you-know-what out of them. Yeah, so that's sort of Nick's MO. Very close to the best, but he'll give us some stuff off the record. So that's the best parts of being down at the NovaCare complex and seeing things. And, you know, I was impressed, Jody, how focused everybody was yesterday. I talked to Kaiser, I talked to Slay, you know, and they both said the same thing, which, so, you know, it's coming from the head coach. You know, everybody talks about the number one seed, and I just brought up the Giants and what they're sort of pressing as being the lesser seed, being able to have success over the years. You know, both guys said, hey, we're 0-0. They're 1-0. So, you know, what we did in the regular season doesn't matter. And I think everybody understands that. And everybody understands this is a great opportunity for the Eagles. And I've said it pretty consistently. You couldn't envision a better path to the Super Bowl. You just got to finish it.
All right, since we're now a year and change, I guess it is, since the growing flower analogy that Nick used, is the plant completely bloomed yet? Is it still blooming? Is this playoff run going to dictate whether it goes full bloom or it stunts out at some point? If you ask Nick today, pick up the flower analogy where you're at, Coach, what would he say?
Well, he would say it's never done. But I would say, and I've said this pretty consistently, and the Eagles can't think this way, but I've said it to the fan base pretty often. Enjoy this, because it's not going to happen a lot. You're not going to be 13-1 a lot. You're not going to be 14-1 with the starting quarterback. Even if he plays at this, he might even get better, Jody. He might have not reached his ceiling as a player, and they might be, you know, 10-4, and he might be a better player. Everything coming together like this, it's rare. So you have to take advantage of where you are in this situation. But, you know, the flower analogy is, you know, that happened after the Raiders loss, which basically 2 weeks before he made the shift into making the play calling, turning over the play calling to Shane Steichen. And obviously the Eagles finished, what was it? You know, they were 2-5 in Vegas. Then they beat Detroit. Then they lost to the Chargers. So they were 3-6 and ended up 9-8. So they were doing the math real quickly. They were 6-2 last year in the regular season. But the one game didn't even count. The last game, the Week 18 game, we always talk about that. 6-2, and 14-1 with the starting quarterback this year. That's why Shane Steichen is where he is, as far as, you know, head coaching interviews, and people looking at him. Got to take advantage of this, man. Got to take advantage of it.
That's what I was going to say. I agree with everything you just said. But if they lose this week to the Giants, everything you just put out there goes by the board. It's almost like it didn't happen. If they lose at home to a team they've already beaten twice, who was just above 500, who beat a bad defensive team the week before, there is a lot at stake for the Philadelphia Eagles this week. All right, J-Mac, tell Coach Sirianni that we send our regards. Johnny Mac is going to head over to South Philly, which means I'm going to be joined by the big double B, Barrett Brooks, up next here on Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Since 1977, it's always been about you, the community, at Rafferty Subaru. And through the Subaru Love Promise, we prove we care by supporting charities like So Good Now.
So Good Now helps kids in under-resourced areas by connecting them with student athletes to serve as mentors. We remove barriers so athletes can help youth in the corners of our communities where light and love are needed most.
When you choose Rafferty Subaru, you help organizations like So Good Now.
It's all about you at Rafferty Subaru.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Post-game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post-game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
You got Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. And that means you got me, Jody McDonald. Sons of Mac. We're down to Mac, but we've added some girth. We've got the big man for the Eagles offensive line, Barrett Brooks. You hear him later in the day on Sports Takes. And always good when he can jump in with me here on Birds 365. How you been, Big B?
Good, man. I can't believe this week is flying by so fast. Finally gonna get an opportunity to check my birds out on a Saturday night, man. It would be Saturday night. They couldn't give us an earlier game. The latest game they could give us, they gave an 8 o'clock game. But hey, I can't complain. Let's go.
It could have been Sunday night. You got to have to wait even longer. So it's not that bad Saturday. Give me the years again that you were an Eagle offensive lineman.
I played from 95 to 98 as an Eagles offensive lineman.
Okay, so 4 years. During those 4 years, who was, in your mind, the Eagles' biggest rival?
It had to be Dallas. You know, when I first stepped into the door, Dallas was the rival of rivals. You know, I can't see any. I mean, the hatred was there. I mean, I had fans tell me you can go 2-14 just as long as Dallas with those 2 wins. That's how passionate the fans were. They made it readily available to indoctrinate it in me since day one.
There are years, and I've learned this from, again, and I moved to town in 1990. So you and I started at close to the same time here in town, but certainly the rivalries predate us by plenty. And guys have told me, diehard Eagle fans who've been Eagle fans for 50, 60 years, that there have been times when the Giant rivalry kind of exceeded the Cowboy rivalry. Overall, it's Cowboys. You're for a year on the field, which you get a much more of a hands-on grip of it than any of us who just watch from the sidelines. You say it was more Cowboys. How much disdain was there for the Giants when you were an Eagle?
It was always a dislike because I was always playing against the best players on each team. And it just so happened that Michael Strahan was a guy I was going against for the most part every single time we played against each other. So, you know, that was a rival for me. They say, you know, Runyon can attest to this. Strahan was that dude, you know what I'm saying? He was probably, he was top 10 as far as guys I played against at the defensive end position. So I would say Strahan was up there. You know, they had an all-star cast. Michael Barrow, Jesse Armstead, Jason Sehorn. I mean, they had some players, man. Keith Hamilton. Really, really good football team back then.
I apologize for this because every time you join me when Johnny Mac jumps out, I tap into your field of expertise. You become a really good football analyst, being on NBC Sports Philly or here on JAKIB Sports YouTube channel.
Thank you.
But I still look at you as the offensive lineman of the Philadelphia Eagles. Sorry. And I don't get a chance to talk to guys who played the game like this very often. So I'm going to ask you about Lane Johnson. Coming back from an injury, at any point during your career, did you come back when you knew you weren't going to be 100%? You had to figure out what that percent was, working with the team and say, here's where I'm at, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do. You guys are going to have to make the call. I'm willing to go out and try, but I'm telling you, I'm not 100. I know what Barrett Brooks is at 100%. I'm not there, but I'm damn close. Did you ever have that experience during your career that you can kind of relate to what Lane Johnson is going through this week?
Well, I actually had the injury that Lane had. It wasn't during the time when I was an Eagle, but I had it for 2 years. You know, it wasn't like I just had it and then it went away. I had it for 2 years, and it was towards the end of my career. And it was cool because I was able to get through it a lot easier than he could, simply because I was just a backup. So I just go through practice, and if I had to go in a game, you know, I could fight through a game. It wasn't like I had to play every single snap. So that's the difference between me and Lane at this point as far as playing. I played with the injury, very painful injury. I got shot up and then, you know, went through the game and then, you know, went home, and it felt like hell the next day. But, you know, he's got to play every single snap. So you know, it's definitely different. As far as, you know, an injury that I went into percents as far as, you know, percentage of me playing, it had to have been my last game as a Philadelphia Eagle. We were bad too. We were 3-13. And I had actually broke my ankle, and I thought it was a sprain. They told me it was a high ankle sprain. So like I said, I shot up, got a shot, tore it all shot, and went out there and played. And it wasn't until I signed with the Detroit Lions, went into camp with the Detroit Lions, and kind of tweaked it again, that I went in and got x-rays, and they said, yeah, man, you know, how come they didn't write on your report that you broke your ankle? I said, I didn't know I broke my ankle. So yeah, there's a piece of dead bone broken off in your ankle. Oof. And that's why you're experiencing the pain you had. So that kind of stuck with me for the rest of my career. But I mean, it was one of those things that I, you know, shot it up and went out there and hobbled and played again the entire game with it.
So you're expecting Lane to do the same thing, get a shot. It's going to get him through the game. He won't be feeling the pain during the game, but then thereafter, man, it starts to come down on you pretty hard, but then you're going to get a shot again the next week if the Eagles beat the Giants this week.
Exactly. You know, you can go through it. You can, you know, pain endureth for a night. You know what I'm saying? In the morning, it'll be worse, but he'll be able to sit back, relax for the entire week. He won't practice the entire week, and then the next week he'll go in and shoot it up again and play again. And next thing you know, he has 2 weeks until the Super Bowl.
And we talked about this before you joined the show. John mentioned one injury because Lane has had his fair share of injuries. You play as long as Lane has, and as hard as Lane does, you're going to get hurt. John mentioned one injury where he thought Lane was actually less than he is at 100%. You could just barely know. Didn't give up any sacks, didn't give up any pressures, but the guy got to breathe on the quarterback. I don't even know how you would measure the fact that he wasn't as good as he usually is. I have zero doubts, damn close, 0.10001% doubt that Lane Johnson is going to be the usual right tackle that he is this week. Am I seeing this through eagle-colored glasses? You're a guy who went to war in those trenches. I never did. But just knowing Lane Johnson, I don't think there's any way that you can see a drop-off in his performance this week.
A 65 to 70% Lane Johnson is better than 100% Jack Driscoll.
Sorry, I mean, that's not mean. That's not meant to offend. That's mean.
No, not being mean. Yeah, exactly.
Lane Johnson, but the facts are the facts.
Right, you're right. You're talking about a guy you can run the offense through, and you know, with them playing against Dexter Lawrence and how he played in that last game against the Minnesota Vikings, you're going to need Lane to be the Lane Johnson that he's been. And you know, reason I say that because this offense runs that the two tackles are basically on an island every single play. They don't worry about, you know, sending protection their way, sending a chipper their way. The protection they covered the most is the interior three guys. So they'll make sure that, you know, there'll never be an opportunity for Kelsey to be one-on-one against Dexter Lawrence. There's always going to be somebody there that's going to help him on that shade. So, you know, that's the way they run their offense. That's the way they protect. They protect their guards and their center as opposed to protecting their tackles. They let the tackles go off on their own. They're on an island every single play. Talking about Revis Island, remember that with your Jets? Revis Island, same thing as Johnson Island and it's Malata Island. So those guys are on their own.
Right. I had a call this week on WIP saying, and when the Eagles give Lane Johnson help, I said the same thing you just said. Not happening. Right. They didn't even give Driscoll help. When he was filling in, they said, guess what? You're filling in for Lane Johnson. We're going to expect you next man up to do what Lane Johnson does. They didn't put extra tight end on his side. They didn't keep a back ended chip to help him. No, that's not the way Stoutland University runs.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. Stoutland University is a crash course, and you're going to be alone, so get the job done.
And that's what how they're going to expect Lane Johnson to do it this week. And I think he's going to do it like Lane Johnson would.
Yep.
All right. And the other question, injury-wise, coming in, of course, is Jalen Hurts and his shoulder. He gets hurt in Chicago, sits for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, the Eagles can't find a way to win one of those two games with Gardner Minshew running the show. So he has to come back for that week against the Giants. They do enough to win the game and secure the number 1 seed and the bye in the first round. How do you think Jalen, just his pure throwing, we all agree that the play calling was a little conservative. It was a little protective of Jalen Hurts as compared to what we saw the Eagles do for the first 14 games of the season. But just the plays that ended up with him throwing the football, how do you think he threw it with the shoulder issue he was dealing with?
I thought he threw fine. I thought he was sharp. His reads were there. He wasn't as polished. You know, that just comes with him not playing for 2 weeks. But he still played.
You think there was actually rust on him?
There was a little bit of rust on him, yeah. There's some balls that were behind him. You know, you could tell the timing wasn't all the way there like I'm used to seeing him throw. But you could definitely see he knew where the ball was supposed to go and how to get it there. And that's the biggest thing. He probably needed that game because I really didn't want him going into the playoffs not having thrown a ball in 2.5, 3 weeks. So this actually worked out pretty well because now he's got that rust off. He's played with these guys, practicing with them. He's been cleared. This will be a great opportunity just to show everybody why he was an MVP candidate. Because I think he's just gonna pick it up like it, like he never, like he wrote, like riding a bike. He's just gonna pick it up and start riding.
All right,
they're not gonna change the game plan though. They're not gonna change. He's going all, balls to the wall. He's going all out. I think they're gonna run. I know they're gonna run the RPOs, read options, and he's gonna use his intangibles. He's gonna use his legs. He'll be ready to go.
And I surely hope that's the case. I don't know that's the case. I believe it's the case, but I'm not positive it's the case. So we're going to have to wait and see on Saturday. Again, referring back to the game that was less than 2 weeks ago against the Giants, where the Giants used second and third teamers on both offense and defense, the Eagles did score 6 times, 5 of which were field goals. That's not good. When you've got the ball in the other team's end of the field 6 times, you want to walk away with more than 22 points. 1 touchdown, 5 field goals. Why do you think the offense stalled out the way that it did in Giant territory?
Because they didn't run the same game plan they were running a game, a regular game. This was just, all right, let's just get through this. Let's get through this healthy, number one. Number two, we're not really worried about showing them anything that could help them out if we play them later on. And I think they were conservative like that because of that. I mean, they kind of saw that they might be playing against this Giants team again. So why give them the whole playbook, in a game that means nothing? So I mean, that's a real evaluation of why they played the game they played. I mean, when you're in the red zone, that's where Jalen Hurts really, takes his cape out, ties his cape up, and he becomes that super player because he can make you wrong any way you look at it. When you're a defensive coordinator and you say, all right, we're going to stop the run. And what does he do? He throws it to his 2 outside 1,000-yard receivers. All right, we're going to stop the pass now. Now he can hand it off to a light box to, either he runs it or he allow Miles Sanders to run it. Oh, we're going to stop the middle of the field. We're going to stop the outside, open up the middle of the field, see if you can beat us there. Well, he's got, Dallas Goedert in there. He can throw to the backs. He's one of those guys that's an X factor that he can make you wrong in every decision you make. He can use your strengths against you. He did it with Micah Parsons. He can do it with Kayvon Thibodeau or Dexter Lawrence. He'll be able to figure out how he can take advantage of the defense and where they're trying to beat him at. If you blitz him, all right, we're gonna blitz him. Hurry that clock up. He can beat you with the blitz. He's got built-in slant plays, comeback plays in which the receivers work well with him. They'll be open. He'll get the ball to him. He is just master at really running this offense to how they customize it to him.
I asked my listening audience on WIP Tuesday night to give me a game changer for the Eagles above and beyond quarterback. You always start with the quarterback. It's the QB and then who else?
Exactly.
So my who else was Dallas Goedert. And I was leaning in that direction before the Giants ever played last week. And I know, by the way, they played and gave up T.J. Hawkinson 129 yards. So they showed that they'll respect your star wide receiver. In Minnesota, that's 1. Jefferson. In Philadelphia, we got more 2. Sorry, Adam Thielen, you're a nice player. You're not Devontae Smith in my eyes. But so it'll be even more difficult for the Giants. But do you think they try and run a similar defense? And if that's the case, can Goddard go off this Saturday?
This is a game that's custom made for Goddard because he's so good. You can't really focus on him because he's such a good run blocker. So he's in on run plays even when on regular running down situations. So he's the best run blocker we have as far as tight ends. So he'll be in the game at all times. How do you pick and choose and differentiate when he's getting the ball and when he's not getting the ball? So yes, he will be a heavy target because they're going to try to go out there. And I mean, they got a Dory Jackson, who's a really, really good player. He's their shutdown corner. But who is he going to say? You going to go with Smitty? You going to try to stop Smitty? Or you going to try to stop Brown? So that's hard to choose from when you're a defensive coordinator. Wink Martindale loves to send the blitz, but can he blitz Jalen Hurts? I mean, what if they get out of their rush lanes? He can run down the field. He'll make a play with his legs. Hurts will make a play with his legs. So it's really goes down to can Fabian Moreau, who had a tough game against them last time they played, can he play well enough to on Smitty to shut him down? Can Darnay Holmes be a guy that can cover in the slot when you have AJ Brown there running a slant? There lies your complex decision making when you're a Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator. Who do you want to stop? Who's the most impactful player? Who can win this game for him? That's 3 guys that can do it for him. Dallas Goedert being the guy who can put the nail in the coffin because he's so athletic, and you can't just put a safety on him because he can out-muscle them, and you can't put a linebacker on him because he's faster than a linebacker. So he's definitely an X factor in his offense.
I think what Barrett Brooks is saying, pick your poison, Wink Martindale.
Absolutely.
You got to select one of them. He is Barrett Brooks. I'm Jody McDonald. We are the Birds 365 guys today. Double B in for Johnny Mac. Had to get over to Eagles press availability. We got a good guest coming up for you next because he's got an interesting perspective on this Saturday's game. Ralph Vacchiano covered the New York Giants for years for New York newspapers, became the NFC East insider this year, which means he's responsible for 4 teams. Hey, good job out of Ralph. He got 3 out of the 4 playoff teams in, right? They're all still standing. After eliminations last week, we still got 3 out of 4 in the NFC East. So we're going to get both an in-town and out-of-town perspective of this weekend's matchup. Ralph Vacchiano of Fox Sports joins us next here on Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Since 1977, it's always been about you, the community, at Rafferty Subaru. And through the Subaru Love Promise, we prove we care by supporting charities like So Good Now.
So Good Now helps kids in under-resourced areas by connecting them with student athletes to serve as mentors. We remove barriers so athletes can help youth in the corners of our communities where light and love are needed most.
When you choose Rafferty Subaru, you help organizations like So Good Now.
It's all about you at Rafferty Subaru.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Post-game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post-game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
Thanks for streaming in here on Birds 365. You got me, Jody McDonald, with my co-host Barrett Brooks, filling in for John McMullen, here with you for the final 40 of today's show. And we're lucky enough to get Ralph Vacchiano from Fox Sports to join us. He covers both the Giants and Eagles since he covers the entire NFC East. Ralph, good to catch up. I just want to advise you in advance. I said something that Barrett didn't like, and you can see what he did to my face. So when he asks you a question, answer him with some respect if you don't want to look like a raccoon like me.
I'll play nice.
But I'll get the first question in here. And I fear that I'll be disrespecting the Giants, but I want the answer anyway. We all acknowledge the Giants are improved over the last couple of weeks. They've gotten better, but it's 2 games we're talking about, right? The win that guaranteed them a division, a playoff spot, a wild card spot, and last week in Minnesota. In between, you had the non-factor game against the Eagles where they played their backups and their star players sat on the bench and the like. Is 2 games enough, as good as they were, to say the Giants are much improved? I can say improved, but I'm not sure I could say much improved. How improved are the Giants?
Well, they're pretty improved. I don't know how much. I mean, I don't think this is suddenly an elite level team. Their 2 best games to me were against the Vikings, the one they almost won on Christmas Eve, then the playoff game. There certainly were elements in there. Daniel Jones looked terrific, but that Vikings defense is pretty terrible, especially the passing defense, being ranked 31st in the league going into both games. So, they're doing some things better. They're blocking better. They're blitzing more effectively. But other than against the Vikings and the Commanders, I kind of need to see it against some better teams. They still look to me like the team that just kind of hangs around most of the time, and then they're hoping things go right in the fourth quarter. Sometimes they do, often they don't.
Well, in evaluating the talent, we can see that the Eagles are more advanced. They've been their coaching staff the last 2 years. And looking at coaching staffs and comparing the two, I mean, I can't say much, but nothing but high praise for, Dable, Martindale, Kafka. These guys have definitely improved the roster that I didn't think could be improved the way it is. I mean, as far as coach of the year, which coach you pick as far as being a coach, out of those 2 as the better coach?
Boy, that's a tough call. That's really the debate for coach of the year, isn't it? Do you go with a coach who has done the most with the least, which would be Brian Daboll? I mean,
absolutely.
I don't think there's a guy in the league that's done more with less than him. This is a team that probably had 4 or 5 win talent by most estimations going in. Or do you take the guy, and it's just as hard, who turned an all-star roster into the dominant team it was expected to be? I think when you've got a choice like that, the fact that the Eagles were so dominant, to me, it's nothing. It's the same thing as an MVP race or any other race. You go with the guy who's won the most. So I would go with Nick Sirianni, which is no disrespect to Brian Daboll, but it's a tough call. I mean, who did a better coaching job is just depends on what you think is harder, coaching a dominant team to dominance or getting blood out of a stone.
All right, Rob, I got another improvement question for you. And I've had to eat some crow on this because from the day he was drafted, I said, Daniel Jones doesn't deserve to be the 5th draft on the pick of the draft. And just thought the Giants overdrafted him and that he would flash and look like a franchise quarterback and then have terrible games on top of it. He really has improved. You're talking about improvement. I don't know about the Giants overall during the course of the year, but Daniel Jones has certainly improved. Do we chalk it up more to experience, that it took some time for him to become as good as he is now? Or do we lay it at the doorstep of the first time he's got a coaching staff that's actually pushing the right buttons and getting the right things out of their quarterback?
Well, I think it's probably a little of both. I think the dramatic improvement this year, you got to give credit to the coaching staff. Daniel Jones is a guy who I honestly always thought had the skills. I thought the beginning of his rookie year, he came in and looked like a polished quarterback many, many times. He had interception troubles. A lot of rookie quarterbacks do. He had fumble issues, which you hoped were going to be corrected. But his biggest issue for the first few years was, I thought, bad coaching. And I thought just a lack of talent around him. My question coming into this year was, can he elevate that talent around him? And can he stay healthy, which was also a big issue with him early in his career. He's obviously stayed healthy. He's obviously elevated the talent, but a lot of that is because Brian Daboll came in and he didn't say, here's my scheme, Daniel, figure it out and run it. He went in and said, what does Daniel Jones do well? What do we do well? We don't have the receivers to throw downfield, so they don't throw downfield. They throw a lot of short passes, and they have a running back and a quarterback who can run. So what do? They run a lot of RPOs and play actions. And, finally, for the first time in his career, they are playing to his strengths, and he has shown, okay, if you do that, I can carry you if I need to. I have the talent to do it. I think there's other things he can probably do with a better cast around him, but this is the hand he's been dealt, and the coaches have put him in the right spot to make the most of it.
You think they franchise tag him, or do you think he's just going to be a guy that's going to go into the season with a mega deal? Has he become Dable's guy?
I think he is Dable's guy. I think the Giants believe that he's their long-term guy, and they will try to sign him to a long-term contract. It's a little bit complicated because they're not. I mean, they do have a lot of cap room. I think they're projected up like $70 million, but that goes pretty fast these days, and they have a lot of holes to fill, a couple of spots on the offensive line, some defensive holes. They need a whole new receiving core, really. So there's a lot of things they need to fill, and they also have to sign Saquon Barkley and plan for signing Dexter Lawrence in another year, and Daniel Jones. Can they manage the cap and get Barkley and Jones in under it and do other things? I don't know. It's probably better for them if they can, but people laugh at me when I say, well, Daniel Jones is going to get $40 million a year. They say, well, he's not worth that. And it doesn't matter. That's what the next quarterback gets.
That's a going rate.
Yeah, they keep going up and up and up. And there's 32 franchises and probably 20 guys capable of playing quarterback at an elite level. When you have one, you don't let it go. And he's not going to give a discount now. It's that I think the franchise tag is in the low $30 million. He's not taking less than that because he can just bank that for a year and watch the prices go up. So I think they'll try to sign him, whether they can or not. My suspicion is either Barkley or Jones will get the franchise tag and the other will get a deal, and they'll just keep working on it through the rest of the season.
All right, I'm going to give you two stat lines that happened just over a month in between, and there's one very telltale number that lines up absolutely perfectly.
Okay.
9 carries for 53 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 carries for 28 yards and no touchdowns. That was Saquon Barkley last week against Minnesota and Saquon Barkley against the Eagles back in week number 14. If you want to add to it, Saquon 5 catches for 56 yards against the Vikings and 2 catches for only 20 yards against the Eagles. Even though he toted it from the line of scrimmage, the exact same in both games. One game he was considered a star. One game left you shaking your head if you're a Giant fan. Which Saquon Barkley shows up this week against Eagles?
Probably a little bit more towards the star. I don't know if it'll be a guy who's going to rush for 120 yards, although, I guess if you're going to find one vulnerability in that Eagles team, I've thought all year long it's their run defense. Sometimes they just have tackling lapses, and if Barkley gets through and they start missing him, yeah, he can have a big game. But he's not that 9-carry, 28-yard guy. I think for a couple of things in that game. One is he developed a neck injury early in that week, and he was a little limited. We don't know a lot about what it was, but he was on the injury report, didn't practice fully. And from what I've been told, what we've all been told, he wasn't completely healthy. He was also pulled early in that game. Once it started to get out of hand, when he stopped playing, it wasn't even all that out of hand, but it was getting there. And they put Matt Breida in, and they decided that, we've seen enough from him. We're not going to put him at risk. So he's one of those guys that he kind of has to stick around long enough, and he'll get those couple of big runs to sort of pad his totals, and he'll have 9 for 28, and then suddenly it'll be 12 for 70 something. And he didn't get that chance because he just wasn't in long enough. So he's running well right now. They're minimizing his run. They've been leaning on Daniel Jones a little bit more, but I think that you'll get a little bit more of the better Barkley in this game for whatever that's worth.
Well, looking at it on the defensive side of the ball, Wink Martindale's a guy that blitzes. He blitzes over 40% of the time, but he didn't blitz this last game against Hurts. He didn't blitz him a lot. Do you think he becomes status quo and blitzes 40% of the time like he did, like he has been doing, or does he rush or play the game differently, knowing that Jalen Hurts, when you blitz, that means you're going one-on-one on the outside, and that means your DB's backs are turned. We know how dangerous he is with his legs. What do you think he's going to do? Is it going to be the latter, or is he going to go ahead and blitz him like status quo?
I think the smart move, and I suspect this is what Wink will do, will be to do what he did against the Vikings, where he made a decision. Justin Jefferson is not going to beat us. So they sat back in a zone scheme, and they had him bracketed all the time, and they called off the blitz because they knew, they needed more help in the back end. There were a lot of times with, 6 defensive backs, and they all dropped back into coverage, which is not what Wink Martindale normally does. So that was his strategy then. We'll give up the blitz. We'll try to get pressure with the front 4. It was certainly easier against the Vikings front than it will be against the Eagles. So maybe there'll be some more blitzes. But I think when you're dealing with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert on top of it, you really can't just send the dogs at Jalen Hurts, especially knowing that he can just run right around it. So to me, blitzing is going to put them in a tough spot. It is what they do, and they will do it at times, but I think he's going to really help. Let's try to get the pressure from the front and contain it from the back end. Let's not give up the big play so we can stay in this game.
Ralph, listening to Giant fans talk about the beatdown that the Eagles put on the Giants back in week number 14. Yeah. Most of them go, yeah, but we didn't have either Xavier McKinney or Dory Jackson, our 2 best DBs, and yeah, your MVP-like quarterback kind of lit us up. But we got our guys back now. We got our 2 best DBs back. How big a difference do they make?
It makes somewhat of a difference. I think when I look back at that game, I remember the 253 rushing yards, but it was really Jalen Hurts and the receivers in the first half when they built the big lead. That's, they didn't start running until the second half, and it was because that secondary was atrocious, and they just didn't have the numbers to really keep up with the receivers that the Eagles had. So I think it'll help to have, Xavier McKinney is a good deep safety. Dory Jackson, at his best, is a top 15 cornerback in the league, maybe a top 10 cornerback in the league. He's coming back from injury, so it's not the same. And he's got a lot of credit for shutting down Justin Jefferson, but that was more really he had a lot of help in that game. So it'll definitely it'll make it a little easier because, again, the Eagles have so many weapons they can throw out there. The more good players you can have to cover them, the better. But, again, they're not that deep in the secondary to begin with. There's still a lot of holes and a lot of guys to cover. So, it'll help, but I don't know how much it'll help.
Well, then you got to look at, I'm going to flip it back to the other side of the ball. And, and looking at how I saw that offense in the beginning of the year run a wildcat system with Saquon Barkley. You have a good enough athlete in Daniel Jones. Do you think they take a little piece of how the Saints beat up on the Eagles defense, where they just ground and pound and really use the athletic talent of a Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara against the Eagles? Can you see that kind of offense coming? Daniel Jones is a pretty good athlete. He's shown that he's a better athlete than people gave him credit for. He's been clocked at 21 miles an hour against the Eagles last year. Do you see them kind of implement that same thing and try to take control? Because teams know the way you beat the Eagles is keeping Jalen Hurts off the field. And it helped out the Saints and allowed them to win the game.
Yeah, I think they could. They'll certainly look at that Saints film, and really it plays to what the Giants do best. They're a running team. The passing game was great in their 2 games against the Vikings, but again, that's the 31st ranked passing defense in the NFL, and I don't think they were that worried about keeping Kirk Cousins off the field. I don't think they felt like they could stop him. So, they're gonna run their RPOs. They're gonna get Barkley involved. Their best player remains Daniel Jones running the football. So you're gonna see a lot of that. I think a lot of it may depend on how the Giants' offensive line, which has been better but not great, can handle that Eagles front and that Eagles pressure. It's another reason why you don't necessarily want Daniel Jones
70 sacks.
Right, 70 sacks against an offensive line that gives up a lot of them and gives up a lot of pressure. So especially, I think that they'll see on the film the weakness on the right side where Evan Neal, the rookie, has been struggling like crazy. So, there's a lot of reasons why you would want to run the ball, or at the very least establish it so then you can pass later. But at heart, they're a running team. And if they think that's what's going to work, and like I said earlier, I think that's the one weakness, if you want to call it that, in the Eagles, is that you can beat their run defense. And if you can do that, at the very least, you can stay in the game.
Ralph V, if I tell you the more physical team is going to win the game, who's got the more physical team, Eagles or Giants?
Good question.
Yeah, I think the Eagles overall probably are a more physical team. I think the Giants can keep up with them in spots. They have a pretty physical defense. The second level defense is very physical. Maybe I would argue at times more so than the Eagles, although it might just look that way because they blitz so often and they hit so much. Their front is probably not as good as the Eagles, but they hit, and Dexter Lawrence is as physical as anybody on that field. It's the offensive line where I think the Eagles would have the real physical edge. That line is just so good. And the Giants' offensive line is not. I mean, it's better, it's improved, but it's mediocre at best, I think, and there are weak spots on it. So overall, the more physical team to me is the Eagles, and I think the way they've run the ball all year long kind of proves that.
What's your key matchup in the game? What are you going to be looking at the most?
That's a good question. I would think, to me, it would be the Giants secondary against those receivers, and I probably put Dallas Goedert right in there. I assume that they're going to have Landon Collins will probably be the guy covering him. He's more of a linebacker nowadays, but in general, I feel like the Giants can run on them. They know the Eagles are going to run. But I look again at that first game, everybody thought the Eagles were just going to run right down the field, and they came out throwing. And Jalen Hurts had like 170 yards in the first half. They ran out to a 21-0 lead. If they can establish that they can throw it and really put the Giants on their heels, then they're going to start running like crazy, and that's where the Eagles become a dangerous two-way threat. Now, if the Giants can somehow contain A.J. Brown, contain Devonta Smith, okay, then maybe you've got a game there. I don't know how that happens, but if early on those two are going and the passing game is going, it could be a really long day for the Giants.
Ralph, I hope that you're getting time and a half for this weekend, because your counterpart for the NFC South or the NFC North don't get to work at all, whereas you have to pay attention for both games because you got two teams on Saturday and then one on Sunday. Cowboys took apart the Bucs. I got to give the Cowboys credit. That was an impressive win on Monday night. I actually thought Brady would pull some Brady magic. He did not. It was a mismatch. But now they have to go to San Francisco and face the hottest team in the National Football League. Any chance you got two teams from the NFC East playing against each other again next week, that the Cowboys can go out to San Francisco and get a win?
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. Look, the 49ers aren't the Bucs. The Bucs was the easy one, although that's a pretty good defense that they beat. The advantage for the Cowboys, to me, in any game, and why they could have a chance out in San Francisco, is when their offense is clicking. It is the best passing offense in the league. They're right up there with, to me, the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills and teams like that. They're not consistently as good, and Dak Prescott has thrown a lot of interceptions lately, but when it's clicking, it's that good, and they run the ball well too. So yeah, they could give that San Francisco defense some trouble and really put some pressure on Brock Purdy to score points, although he's answered the bell every single time this year. They've got a pretty good diverse offense too. So I think the 49ers will win. I think they probably are the better overall team right now, but if that Cowboys offense that showed up against Dallas shows up in San Francisco, I think you're going to have a heck of a game.
Can't wait, man. This is what football is all about, man. Smash mouth, NFC East football. I can remember playing against Strahan and all those guys, but, looking at Lane, injuries has definitely been a problem with, the Eagles, and, Lane's hobble right now, but I think a 70% Lane is better than what they had there before. What's your sense of Thibodeau and was it Rogian, whatever his name is? The defensive end. Oh my goodness. Ojulari. Yeah, Ojulari against our two tackles, because they're going to be one-on-one with those guys the entire day.
It's a bigger challenge than they faced in Minnesota, a bigger challenge than they faced, anytime really down the stretch. Obviously they didn't play in that last game against Philadelphia, but they're better players. I think Thibodeau's going to be a really good player. He's aggressive. He's starting to develop some moves, and he's got some confidence there. But yeah, that Eagles offensive line has impressed me all year long, and I've seen better defensive ends and better edge rushers not get to Jalen Hurts. I think when you've got two young, aggressive edge rushers like that, if I'm the Eagles, I'm looking at it thinking, okay, I might let them think they're going to get to me and then just dart the quarterback around the outside or throw a quick screen pass or something. I think you can really set up a young pass rusher, in a playoff, second playoff game. But they're good players, and they'll make their mark a little in this league. I don't know that they're the ones to watch on the Giants front. I think the one the Eagles are going to be worried about mostly is Dexter Lawrence. He is a monster in the middle.
Pro Bowler, All Pro.
Absolutely. You know, he has the, I mean, Jason Kelsey's terrific, but Dexter Lawrence has the ability to get in and get some pressure. And then it's up to the young guys on the outside. You know, they're going to have to worry about containing Hurts when he leaves the pocket. You know, can they be in the right position? It's such a tall task against a quarterback in an offense like this. You know, they're good, but let's see if they're up to it.
All right. You just said his name for the first time. We had you on for over 20 minutes. The first time any one of the three of us mentioned Jalen Hurts, who to me is the entire key of the game.
Mm-hmm.
You've been at the Giants availability, though you're down here in Philly too. There's what they say, and then sometimes it's how they say it.
Right.
What do the Giants think? What percentage do they think Hurts is going to be? Are they planning to play their game? Are they ready to play their game defensively as if Jalen Hurts is damn close to 100% and can perform at the MVP level that he did for the first 14 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think they're expecting that. I don't know that they believe he's 100%. And I think that there's a few of them that probably want to test that theory on his right shoulder if they get the chance. But I think they believe that the Eagles will come out acting like he's 100%. You know, he looked like he could play in that season finale. It looked like they just didn't want to let him run the ball. And I'm sure that's what the case was. Let's protect him. Let's tell him to run out of bounds. Let's not call a run play. I don't think they're going to go into this game doing that. I mean, maybe they pull back the reins a little in the second half if they're up or something, or they get a little cautious in some spots. But I think they know that, you know, Jalen Hurts, he's the offense. I mean, his threat to run or throw outside of the pocket and move all over the place is what really makes them so dangerous and so effective. And the Giants absolutely think, you know, he's physically capable of doing that. How long he lasts, whether he can take a hit on that shoulder, all that is up in the air. But I think coming out, they're expecting to see the two-way Jalen Hurts that, you know, they saw in the first 14 games of the season.
Ralph, great stuff. We appreciate you jumping in with us. 40 during the afternoon, down into the 30s. You're going to have a heavy coat to get out of there.
Fine with me.
Football and for mid-January, you can't complain if there's going to be no snow and the first number of the temperature isn't a 1. That's not all that bad. So have a good time covering the game on Saturday. Thanks for lending insight with us today here on Birds 360.
Ralph, thanks, bro.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
That is Ralph Vacchiano, who, after writing for New York papers for years, jumped over to the Fox world and became their NFC East insider. So he's been covering Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, and Commanders. He put all his Commanders papers away. He's already filed all of those, but he's still referencing Cowboys, Giants, Eagles, 3 NFC East teams still playing. There's only one other team left in the playoffs. That's San Francisco. So 3 of the 4 are NFC East teams. So Ralph's staying on top of his game. He gave us some good insights here. We appreciate it for him. All right, he is Barrett Brooks in for John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Come back. We still got 10 minutes to play here on Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Since 1977, it's always been about you, the community, at Rafferty Subaru. And through the Subaru Love Promise, we prove we care by supporting charities like So Good Now.
So Good Now helps kids in under-resourced areas by connecting them with student athletes to serve as mentors. We remove barriers so athletes can help youth in the corners of our communities where light and love are needed most.
When you choose Rafferty Subaru, you help organizations like So Good Now.
It's all about you at Rafferty Subaru.
Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Game Show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
We're back with a blow on the show here on Birds 365. Barrett Brooks in for John McMullen. Barrett, each and every single year with a team. How many years did you play in the league again?
12.
12. So every year is different. You have some carryovers, a lot of the same teammates, staying with the same team. You moved to a couple of different teams after you left here in Philadelphia, but no 2 years are exactly alike. Every year is different because guys are going to change. That's just the nature of the beast. This is a special year for the Philadelphia Eagles. 14-3 is 14-3. Jalen Hurts probably going to be the runner-up for MVP. As many Pro Bowlers and all-pro guys as they have, and Nick Sirianni very much in the conversation for Coach of the Year. But if they lose this week, how do we look at this year? I'm trying not to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm also putting a potential reality into play. They had this great season, so many awards, so many highs, and so few lows. But you talk about cratering out. If they get beat by a team that they beat twice during the season on their field that they worked so hard to make sure the game was going to be played at, how do we look at this season if they don't win on Saturday?
Joe, I'm going to tell you the truth, man. It'll be a colossal failure. Colossal failure, because this team, after they had the best trade probably this year ever, the best trade this year, I think, was them acquiring A.J. Brown. It's been the best trade Howie's, since Howie's been the GM. It really pushed them towards being a Super Bowl winning team, because every acquisition after that was win now mode from that point on. Kazir White coming in, them going to get Bradbury, C.J. Garner-Johnson. All these guys come in to make a run right now, an impact right now. And because they signed A.J. Brown, I think it really put them in position like, look, we found a way in which we can really accelerate us winning a Super Bowl. We put a lot of eggs in this basket this year. So for them not to win a Super Bowl or either get to the Super Bowl will be a colossal failure for both the GM, the coaches, and this team, period. They have the best, to me, they have the best team in the NFL. They might not be playing the best football right now, but collectively, they have the best collection of athletes in the NFL, player for player. You know what I'm saying? So because you have that, you got to at least be in the dance. You at least got to be in the Super Bowl. So, this is a must win. The next few games are a must win because they got to get to the bowl. They got to get at least an opportunity to play for the trophy in Arizona.
All right, Double B, you mentioned a player, and he leads me into my final question of the day, and that would be A.J. Brown. he was brought here to raise the offense. He has raised the offense.
Absolutely.
He has accomplished exactly what they wanted to accomplish when they acquired him. This week, though, he's the only guy in this team who can talk to being a number 1 seed and going home before you blink. Last week, Tennessee was the number 1 seed in the AFC. People forget that. Oh, it had to be the Chiefs or the Bills. Nope. It was Tennessee. The Titans were the number 1 seed in the AFC last year, and they got picked off by the Bengals. Now, AJ had a pretty good game. He made over 120 yards, but they lost 19-16 to Cincinnati, late pick by their quarterback. Does anybody ask him about last year? Does he volunteer any information on how painful that could be? And we got to avoid this because I'll tell you, my year sucked thereafter when we got picked off by Cincinnati. Does AJ even talk about it this week?
No, I think he's talking to the older guys, talking to guys like BG, Fletcher Cox, about what it feels like to win a Super Bowl. He's more trying to reach and, pick and prod them for every ounce of information he can use to help him just gain that perspective of what it is to win a Super Bowl, to have a ring. There's only a couple guys on the team that, have rings, and Ndamukong Suh, Fletcher Cox, guys like that. I think Sweat was on the team then also. There's some guys on this team that were in that Super Bowl run. So, Kelsey, go and talk to those guys. See what it took to get to that next level of being a champion, what it took for you to, be a part of the greatest day in Philadelphia football history, winning a Super Bowl for the first time. I think he's more so, trying to get that type of sense of, all right, I mean, these guys have been there before. Let me see what it takes, and we're going to go on from there. Because a lot of these guys already know what it is to get picked out in the first round. I mean, that's what happened to the Eagles last year. But they were on borrowed time anyways. They were on, it was almost fool's gold anyways. To think they were going to beat Brady and them. They were a great team last year. Was, slim to none. But, when you say there's a chance, there's a chance. So he already knows what it is to be in that position. A lot of people know what it is to be in that position. But there's the guys on this team that know what it is to be a champion, the best offensive tackle in the league. I remember when I won the Super Bowl, I was the 3rd best offensive tackle in the league because we won a Super Bowl and I was on that winning Super Bowl team. So I was the 3rd best. You know what I'm saying? It was documented. You know what I'm saying? I was Super Bowl XL champ. You know what I mean? So we were the champions. We were the best team. We had the best quarter. We had the best everything because we were the best team. So, I mean, that's what he's trying to figure out.
Fair way to look at it and a smart way to look at it. All right. And before we wrap up this show, I just want to talk to one individual Philadelphia Eagle. Now, I don't know if he's watching the show right now or if he's watching it after the fact or if someone tells him to watch it after it. Jake Elliott, we have complete and utter faith in you that you will make all needed extra points this week. Because we did see on Monday night, extra points are not a given. Brett Maher
Right.
of the Cowboys. Holy mackerel. And hopefully this week, Jake, you get to kick more extra points than field goals you did last night. Did a hell of a job kicking those field goals against the Giants and made sure that they got the number 1 seed. But hopefully your field goal kicking expertise is less needed this week against the Giants and more of those made extra points. Do not converse with Brett Maher this week. I don't know if you're friends with him or not, but just keep your distance. Let him go to the West Coast and kick against the 49ers. You just stay on point here in Philadelphia.
Right.
Double B, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for jumping in for Johnny Mac today. Thanks, bud. That is Barrett Brooks with me here on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac will be back mañana. We got the full 2 hours on a football Friday leading up to Giants Eagles here on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.